The story of this drawing goes like this. Jeremy had always despised his Aunt Clara. It wasn't that she was a bad person, it was just that she had a way of making him feel uncomfortable, even repulsed. The source of his unease was Clara's peculiar habit of smothering him with kisses whenever she visited. Clara was a heavyset woman with a penchant for garish makeup, especially her thick, sticky lipstick that always left a mark. But it wasn't just the lipstick that bothered Jeremy. It was the scent that accompanied her, a nauseating blend of cheap perfume and something more sinister, like the stench of a dying flower. One chilly evening, as winter's grip tightened, Clara arrived for a visit. The holiday season was in full swing, and the family had gathered to celebrate. The scent of fresh baked cookies filled the air, and the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree cast a warm glow throughout the house. Jeremy couldn't avoid Aunt Clara forever. She cornered him in the living room, her red lips smeared with her signature thick lipstick.
Come here, sweetie,
Clara said, leaning in to plant her customary kiss on Jeremy's cheek. He reluctantly leaned in, his skin crawling with revulsion. As her lips made contact with his cheek, something inexplicable happened. Jeremy felt a sudden urge of dread, unlike anything he had ever experienced. Aunt Clara's lips didn't just kiss him, they seemed to engulf his entire cheek. Her mouth stretched impossibly wide, and her lipstick grew thicker and more vicious by the second. It clung to Jeremy's skin like a relentless vice, suffocating him. Panicked and gasping for breath, Jeremy pushed himself away from his aunt's grasp. Her lips snapped back to their normal size, and she looked at him with a concern.
Are you all right, dear?
She asked, oblivious to the horror she had just unleashed. Jeremy didn't answer. He stumbled backward, his heart pounding into his chest, and his eyes locked on Clara's face. It was then that he saw it. The unmistakable glint of malevolence in her eyes, a sinister gleam that sent shivers down his spine. Terrified, Jeremy fled the room and locked himself in his bedroom. He could hear the muffled sounds of laughter and conversations from the living room, but he dared not go back out there. He knew that something was terribly wrong with his aunt, something that defied explanation. That night, Jeremy couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, his mind replaying the horrific images of his aunt's transformation over and over. He couldn't shake the feeling that she had become something otherworldly, something monstrous. In the days that followed, Jeremy's behavior changed. He became withdrawn and reclusive, spending hours in his room drawing. His sketches were all the same, a grotesque, human-like creature with multiple mouths and thick, vicious lipstick. His parents grew increasingly worried about him. They tried to get him to talk, to explain what had happened that night. But Jeremy remained silent. He couldn't find the words to describe the terror he had witnessed. As the years passed, Jeremy's obsession with his drawings only grew. He filled notebook after notebook with images of the creature that had once been his aunt. He became a recluse, rarely leaving his room, and he stopped attending family gatherings altogether. One Christmas, many years later, Jeremy's parents received a phone call. It was Clara, inquiring about their son. She had heard that he was unwell and wanted to visit him. Jeremy's parents hesitated, but they eventually agreed, hoping that her presence might help their troubled son. When Clara arrived at Jeremy's house, she found the front door unlocked. She ventured inside, calling out for her nephew.
Come here, sweetie.
The house was eerily silent, and the air felt heavy with foreboding. She climbed the stairs to Jeremy's room and knocked softly on the door. There was no response. She pushed the door open and gasped at what she saw. The room was filled with Jeremy's drawings. Covering every inch of wall space, they depicted the same horrifying creature over and over again. The monster that had once been on Clara. But there was no sign of Jeremy. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she realized that her nephew was gone. The room felt like a shrine to his obsession, a testament to the horror that had consumed him. She fled the room in a panic, the echoes of her footsteps the only sound in the empty house. Jeremy was never found, and his disappearance remained a mystery. His family could only wonder what had become of him and what he had witnessed that fateful Christmas Eve. Clara, haunted by the memory of her nephew's terror, could never shake the feeling that she had unwittingly unleashed something malevolent that night. Something that had taken Jeremy away forever. This drawing is from a girl named Monica, and she really hoped she wouldn't have to draw this. Here's how the story goes. Monica had always felt different. She was a quiet, introspective girl with an uncanny connection to the spiritual realm. From a young age, she was aware of her twin spiritual self. A deformed, doll-like figure with skin that seemed to chip away like the surface of an ancient painting. Every night, this spectral doppelganger appeared by her bedside. The first time Monica encountered her twin self, it was a night like any other. She lay in her small, dimly lit bedroom, clutching her favorite teddy bear. The room was silent, except for the occasional hoot of an owl outside her window. As Monica drifted into sleep, she felt an eerie presence in the room. Suddenly, she bolted upright in bed. There it was, the twin self. Its grotesque appearance, with its skin peeling away and mismatched eyes, sent a jolt of terror through Monica's body. She let out a scream, and the apparition vanished, leaving Monica trembling and wide awake. From that night on, the twin self became a nightly visitor. It would appear by her bedside, hovering like a dark cloud, and speak in a whispery voice that chilled Monica to her core.
You will vanish from this earth.
It would say, its voice like a haunting melody.
You will become dust.
Monica never grew accustomed to the dread that washed over her each time her twin self appeared. She shivered beneath her blankets, the words echoing in her mind long after the spectral figure had gone. During the day, Monica found solace in her art. She had always been a talented artist, and her drawings became an escape from the nightmarish encounters with her twin self. She sketched the spectral figure over and over again, striving to capture every haunting detail with precision. Years passed, and Monica's drawings became so lifelike that they seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. She couldn't escape the feeling that her twin self was growing more powerful, its nightly visits more intense and chilling. One day, as Monica put the finishing touches on her latest drawing, she felt a sudden, sharp pain in her chest. She gasped and clutched her heart, her vision blurring. It felt as though something was tearing at her very soul. As she crumpled on the floor, her hand brushed against the drawing she had just completed. It was her twin self, more detailed and lifelike than ever before. Monica's consciousness faded, and she lost all sense of time and space. When Monica awoke, she found herself in a nightmarish realm. It was a place of darkness and decay, where twisted, shadowy figures roamed. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and a sense of foreboding hung in the air. She tried to call out, but her voice came out as a hollow echo, barely audible. The figures in the distance turned their attention toward her, their blank eyes fixed on her like predators closing in on their prey. And then, from the depths of the darkness, emerged her twin self. It materialized before her, its skin peeling away like old paint, its eyes filled with malice. It reached out and touched Munika's forehead, sending a shock of agony through her body.
You have become dust.
It whispered, its voice echoing in the abyss. Munika's vision blurred as her very essence seemed to disintegrate. She felt herself breaking apart, becoming one with the darkness and decay that surrounded her. In her final moments, she understood the terrible truth. Her twin self had warned her all along, and now she was becoming nothing more than dust. As Munika faded into the abyss, her twin self watched with satisfaction. Its horrific visage etched into the nightmarish landscape. It had taken Munika's life, just as it had foretold, leaving behind only the haunting memory of her existence. This drawing was done by a kid named Pete. Here's the story behind it. Pete was an ordinary boy with an extraordinary obsession. Every day, he would retreat to his small, dimly lit room, armed with an assortment of pencils and a worn sketchbook. He drew the same picture over and over again, as if trying to unlock a door to his distant memories. The scene he drew was fragmented and hazy, a chaotic jumble of emotions and sensations. In it, there was a big man, menacing and tall, holding a gleaming knife. Pete remembered the knife, the cold steel, the glint of malevolence, but he couldn't recall much else. His early childhood memories were like faded photographs, half-remembered and elusive. What he did remember was the feeling.
Hey, Pete.
The fear.
This won't take long.
The terror. The pain.
This shouldn't hurt, Pete.
It was etched into his mind, a haunting echo of a past he couldn't quite grasp. The drawing was his way of confronting that lingering trauma, an attempt to make sense of the fragments that haunted him. Pete would sit for hours, his fingers smudging the paper as he sketched the man with the knife. He felt as though he were inside his own head, lost in a never-ending loop of memories and emotions. The room would grow dark around him, but he couldn't tear himself away from the drawing. The fierce laughter haunted him the most. It echoed in his mind like a cruel taunt, a reminder of something unspeakable. Pete would sometimes find himself mimicking the laughter, his own voice mingling with the spectral echoes in his head. One evening, as Pete lost himself in his drawing once again, he heard a knock at his door. It was a sound that pierced through the fog of his obsession, pulling him back to reality. He blinked, his hand still clutching the pencil, and slowly rose from his chair. The knocking persisted, insistent and demanding. Pete's heart raced as he approached the door, his palms sweaty and trembling. He had isolated himself from the world, and the thought of a visitor was almost inconceivable. He hesitated for a moment, then slowly turned the doorknob. As he swung the door open, his breath caught in his throat. Standing before him was a man, a big man, just like in his drawings. The man's eyes were cold and calculating, and in his hand, he held the knife. Pete's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the glinting blade. For a moment, they stood there, locked in a silent tableau of fear and recognition. The man's lips curled into a sinister smile, and Pete felt a chill run down his spine. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. It was as though he had been transported back to that long-forgotten night. And then the man spoke, his voice a cruel whisper that sent shivers down Pete's spine.
You remember, don't you, Pete?
He said, his words dripping with malice. Pete's mind raced, his memories a chaotic whirlwind. The laughter, the pain, the knife, it all came rushing back. He couldn't deny it any longer. He remembered. As the man took a step closer, Pete's instincts kicked in. He slammed the door shut and locked it, his heart pounding like a drum. He stumbled back, his breath raged, his mind a maelstrom of fear and confusion. But when he turned to face the room, he saw it. The same drawing he had been obsessively sketching for years. The man with the knife. Except now, the man in the drawing was no longer just an image on paper. Pete's hand trembled as he watched the man emerge from his drawing, his form shifting and solidifying. The man with the knife was no longer a memory or a drawing. He was real, and he was here. Pete's heart raced as he realized the truth. He had summoned the man from his past, the embodiment of his darkest fears. The man raised a gleaming knife, his laughter echoing in the room, and Pete knew that the echoes of his obsession had finally caught up with him. The room grew dark, and Pete's screams blended with the laughter as the man approached. The knife poised to plunge into the depths of his memories once more.